Clint Eastwood, the legendary director and actor, is known for his stoic strength and iconic status. But behind his calm demeanor lies a man who has faced betrayal, loss, and personal tests of loyalty. In a world where respect and honor are paramount, Clint's unforgiving stance has shaped his career and legacy. Discover the untold stories of Hollywood's toughest figure and learn the true price of betrayal, a price Clint Eastwood has paid over and over again. Clint Eastwood is a name that resonates with strength, wisdom, and a career that spans decades in Hollywood. He's the type of person many admire for his calm, disciplined approach to filmmaking, as well as his impressive range as an actor and director. To the public, Clint has always seemed like a symbol of unshakable authority, someone who stood tall and untouchable in the world of entertainment. But behind his iconic persona lies a different story, one filled with betrayal, tough decisions, and lessons learned the hard way. Many people know Clint Eastwood as the tough, silent cowboy from the good, the bad, and the ugly, or as the wise director behind some of Hollywood's greatest films. What they don't know is the personal struggles he faced, the conflicts that shaped him, and how the very people he trusted the most stabbed him in the back. This side of Clint, the one that is rarely spoken of, reveals a much more human side to this legendary figure, showing that even the strongest personalities are vulnerable to the very betrayals they least expect. His journey is a reminder that even the most revered icons aren't immune to the harsh realities of trust, loyalty, and the cost of success. While Clint Eastwood has stood firm throughout his career, he's not untouched by the betrayals of those he once considered allies. His story isn't just about triumph. It's about learning from those who turned against him and navigating the pain of lost trust. But what if I told you that Clint Eastwood, the man we all thought was untouchable, faced betrayals from the very people he trusted the most? Clint Eastwood has long been seen as the embodiment of strength and wisdom in Hollywood. He became a symbol of toughness, discipline, and cool-headed leadership, known for his quiet but commanding presence. Whether he was playing a grizzled cowboy or directing a tense thriller, Clint's image was one of unshakable authority. He built a reputation as someone who didn't need to speak much to be heard. His calm demeanor and ability to stay focused, even in the most stressful situations, made him a respected figure both on and off the screen. Clint became an icon not only for his acting, but also for his work behind the camera as a director. His films are known for their precision, attention to detail, and clear vision, qualities that earned him immense respect in Hollywood. People loved Clint Eastwood because of his no-nonsense approach. As a director, he was known for being efficient, often finishing a scene in just a few takes. He trusted his actors to bring their best to the table and didn't waste time with unnecessary retakes. This approach was both refreshing and rare in an industry often known for dragging out production schedules. Clint was admired for his ability to create powerful films with a focus on the essentials: story, performance, and authenticity. He didn't shy away from tough subjects or uncomfortable truths. His public persona was that of a man who stood by his principles and wouldn't bend under pressure. However, behind this image of precision and control, there were cracks in Clint's world. Despite his success, Clint's journey was not without conflict. His perfectionism, which earned him admiration, also came with a price. His high standards and no-compromise attitude often put him at odds with others, even those he trusted. The same qualities that made Clint a beloved figure in Hollywood also made him a target for betrayal. He expected loyalty and dedication from everyone around him, but what he didn't always get in return was the respect he deserved. Betrayal, it seemed, was a cost of his success. As Clint's career progressed, the same people who once stood by him, supporting his vision, began to fall short of his expectations. These betrayals weren't loud or dramatic, but rather silent, subtle, and often from those he considered closest. Whether it was through disrespectful behavior, undermining his authority, or simply failing to meet his standards, Clint began to feel the sting of those he had once trusted. His calm nature didn't prevent these disappointments from cutting deep. In fact, it made them even harder to understand. He was a man who worked with precision and expected the same from those around him. But, in Hollywood, not everyone could live up to his high expectations. With every success, however, came a darker truth. A truth that even Clint's legacy couldn't escape. Leonardo DiCaprio. When Clint Eastwood was approached to direct J. Edgar, there was excitement in the air. The pairing of one of Hollywood's most revered directors with the industry's brightest young star, Leonardo DiCaprio, was seen as a dream collaboration. DiCaprio, fresh off of his successes in films like Inception and The Aviator, was known for his intense commitment to his roles. His passion for acting was undeniable, and the thought of him taking on the role of the controversial FBI director J. Edgar Hoover generated significant buzz. Clint Eastwood, a director known for his precision and minimalist approach, had always brought out the best in his actors, allowing them to breathe life into their roles with subtlety and nuance. It seemed like a perfect match. The stakes were high, and expectations were sky-high. However, from the very beginning, there was friction. Clint's style of directing was known for its efficiency and restraint. He was a man who didn't waste time. If the scene was good, it was good, and he moved on. But DiCaprio's approach was different. Leo, as he is known to do with every role, immersed himself fully in his character. He came to set prepared with reams of research, pages of historical notes, and even marked up FBI memos. He was determined to get every detail right. While this passion was admirable, it clashed with Clint's style. DiCaprio's research-heavy method often led to long discussions and multiple takes, while Clint preferred a more instinctual approach. The tension began to build on set, as Leo's drive for perfection began to wear on Clint's patience. For Clint, there was only so much room for constant analysis and overthinking. His focus was always on getting the scene right quickly, whereas Leo was looking for something deeper, a perfect portrayal, no matter how many takes it took. The breaking point came during a particularly emotional scene, a breakdown that DiCaprio had to perform. Leo nailed it in one take, delivering an incredibly raw and emotional performance. It was, by all accounts, a perfect take. The room went silent. Clint, ever the professional, murmured, "Perfect! Cut!" But that wasn't enough for DiCaprio. He wanted to do another take, and another, and another. By the sixth take, Clint, visibly frustrated, was no longer behind the camera. He stood off to the side, leaning on a craft table, coffee in hand, his face stone cold. A crew member asked if he was all right, to which Clint simply responded, "He's still searching for something I already found." The tension between Clint and Leo had reached a boiling point. Clint was done. He didn't believe in doing something over and over again. To him, acting was about instinct, about capturing a moment. For Leo, it was about pushing beyond perfection. After that day, Clint's attitude toward DiCaprio changed. While Leo would go on to receive an Academy Award for his role in The Revenant, a testament to his dedication and talent, he never received another phone call from Clint Eastwood. The director's silence was his answer. Clint respected Leo's talent, but couldn't work with him again. To Clint, perfection wasn't about revisiting something over and over. It was about finding it once and moving on. The fallout was significant. DiCaprio had achieved the ultimate recognition in his field, but Clint's decision to cut him off left a mark on his career, one that he never fully understood. DiCaprio never spoke about the incident publicly, but Clint's silence said everything. For Clint, it was more than just a disagreement on set. It was a fundamental clash in philosophy. While DiCaprio would go on to win an Oscar, Clint Eastwood never called him again. But this wasn't the only betrayal. Michael Moore, Clint Eastwood's films, have always been about respect, honor, and the sacrifices made by those who served their country. His deep admiration for soldiers and the military runs through many of his projects, most notably American Sniper. The film was a tribute to Chris Kyle, a Navy SEAL sniper, and Clint's portrayal of military life was grounded in a deep sense of respect for the sacrifices those men and women made. Clint, a staunch believer in the dignity of soldiers, saw them as heroes. To him, military service was not a political statement, but a matter of duty and honor. He approached his craft with the same respect for discipline and hard work that he believed military personnel embodied. This was central to his identity, both as a director and a man. On the other hand, Michael Moore, a documentary filmmaker known for his outspoken political views, often took a different stance. Moore's work had been controversial, particularly his criticism of American politics and foreign policy. He became a prominent figure in the political left, often questioning the actions of the U.S. government and its military. Moore's most famous work, Fahrenheit 9/11, was a harsh critique of the Iraq War and the Bush administration. For Clint, Moore's approach was the opposite of everything he stood for. To Clint, Moore's documentaries seemed less like artistic expression and more like political grandstanding. They were about making statements rather than telling stories. Their tension had been simmering for years, but it reached a boiling point when Moore publicly mocked American Sniper. In a tweet, Moore compared the film to Nazi propaganda, implying that it glorified violence and dehumanized its subjects. He took aim at Clint's portrayal of soldiers, calling it dangerous and morally wrong. This struck a chord with Clint, who saw it as an attack not only on his film, but on the soldiers who had risked their lives for their country. Clint's response to Moore was not immediate, but the damage had been done. Moore's words cut deeply, challenging Clint's core values. It wasn't just a disagreement over a movie. It was a personal affront to everything Clint believed in when it came to honoring those who served in the military. Clint Eastwood, true to his nature, didn't respond with anger or a public outburst. Instead, he did what he does best. He went silent. There was no heated exchange, no public confrontation. Clint didn't need to explain himself or engage with Moore's criticism. He simply erased Moore from his life. The director didn't engage in any more discussions or debates about American Sniper or Moore's political views. Clint didn't even acknowledge Moore in interviews or public appearances. In Clint's world, that silence was the loudest message he could send. It was a clear-cut decision to freeze out anyone who would disrespect what he valued most. Clint didn't just freeze him out, he erased him. For Clint, this wasn't a personal grudge, but a matter of principle. Moore's mockery of a film that honored soldiers, to Clint, was unforgivable. It wasn't about politics, it was about respect, and Clint wasn't willing to compromise on that. The silence was not just a form of rejection, it was Clint's way of making sure Moore knew exactly where he stood. From that point on, Michael Moore was no longer part of Clint Eastwood's world. No apology would ever be enough. But Clint's decision to cut Moore out of his life wasn't an isolated incident. His unwavering principles and deep respect for loyalty meant that others too would find themselves frozen out if they crossed him. The question remains, though, who else did Clint push away in the name of respect? Barbra Streisand. Clint Eastwood is known for his minimalist approach to filmmaking. As a director, he's famous for getting the scene right in just 1 or 2 takes, trusting the actors to bring their best in the moment. His focus has always been on instinct, capturing the essence of the story with as little interference as possible. Clint believes that if it's not real the first time, it's not worth filming. This approach reflects his no-nonsense attitude toward filmmaking efficiency, clarity, and authenticity. He works quickly, trusting his team to do their best without overthinking the process. His style contrasts sharply with that of Barbra Streisand, one of the most famous actresses turned directors in Hollywood. Barbra Streisand, on the other hand, is known for her perfectionism. As a director, she's meticulous, often spending hours on a single scene, trying to get every detail just right. For Streisand, it's not just about the finished product, it's about the process. She's someone who insists on multiple takes, sometimes 40 or 50, to capture a single expression. This perfectionist approach often meant long days on set, and her films could be known for their lengthy and meticulous production timelines. Clint, who was accustomed to a quicker pace, found it hard to work alongside someone with such a different creative philosophy. Their creative rivalry began in the early 1980 seconds, when both were beginning to direct films. As they both rose in Hollywood, their paths crossed, but not always smoothly. The tension between Clint's instinct-driven, efficient style and Streisand's meticulous, perfectionist approach created a divide. As Clint continued to succeed with his films, Streisand was also garnering attention for her work behind the camera. While both were talented in their own right, their working styles couldn't have been more different. The tension was noticeable, but it was during the production of The Prince of Tides in 1991 that things really came to a head. Streisand had been working for years on The Prince of Tides with hopes of receiving a Best Director nomination. But when the film failed to get her that recognition, Clint's words cut to the core. He was overheard telling a friend that if she made decisions faster, she might finish more than 3 films in 15 years. It wasn't a personal attack, but it was a harsh criticism of Streisand's methodical approach to filmmaking. Word spread quickly, and soon enough, their professional relationship became more strained. The real clash, however, occurred when The Bridges of Madison County came into play. Streisand had originally been attached to direct the film, but backed out after a lengthy period of indecision. Clint, not one to sit around waiting, took over the project, rewriting the script and making it his own. He quickly turned it into a quiet, emotional masterpiece that earned an Oscar nomination for Meryl Streep and solidified Clint's place. As a director who didn't need to dwell on the details to create something beautiful, the success of Bridges of Madison County became Clint's silent revenge against Streisand's indecisiveness. For Clint, Streisand represented everything he disliked about the newer, more controlled style of Hollywood filmmaking. He didn't have time for endless rethinking or trying to perfect every frame. He believed in the power of instinct, getting the shot right the first time, and moving on. Streisand, who had taken years to perfect her approach, was the opposite of Clint's efficient, bare-bones style. Her backing out of The Bridges of Madison County and Clint's subsequent success with it felt like a perfect example of how Clint's way, a quiet, steady approach, was the winning formula. In the end, Bridges of Madison County was both Clint's triumph and a subtle rebuke to Streisand's slow, perfectionist methods. Clint's response to Streisand's actions was quiet, but it spoke volumes. His ability to take over the project and make it successful without saying a word about the personal rift demonstrated his belief in his own method. He didn't need to engage in public drama. His work spoke for itself. But Streisand wasn't the only one who crossed the line. Tommy Lee Jones, Clint Eastwood, and Tommy Lee Jones were both known for their strong personalities and commanding presence in Hollywood, which led to high expectations when they were cast together in the Line of Fire. Clint, with his steady, no-nonsense approach to directing, and Jones, with his raw intensity and deep commitment to his craft, seemed like the perfect fit. Both men had carved out their own niches in Hollywood. Clint as the calm, calculating director and actor, and Jones as the fiery, intense performer. The industry buzzed with excitement at the prospect of the two alphas working together, and many believed their strong personalities would complement each other well. However, it didn't take long for tensions to rise. Tommy Lee Jones was known for his method acting, staying in character even off-set. While some actors embraced this approach, Clint Eastwood wasn't one of them. Clint had always believed in efficiency, getting the scene right in as few takes as possible. His method of working was to trust his actors to bring their best in the moment, without overthinking or reworking the performance endlessly. But Jones, on the other hand, was meticulous, rewriting his lines, staying in character even between takes, and sometimes pushing the boundaries of what was expected on set. This method, while effective for some, grated on Clint. His calm, disciplined approach didn't mesh with Jones's intensity, and the differences became more noticeable as production continued. As filming went on, the tension between the two men only grew. Clint's frustration started to show as Tommy Lee Jones continued to rehearse his lines over and over, never truly stepping out of character. Clint, who prided himself on getting the performance right in the first or second take, found Jones' constant need to revisit his lines exhausting and unnecessary. He was used to moving quickly, keeping the production on schedule, but Jones's insistence on continuing his performance offset and during breaks disrupted Clint's smooth workflow. For Clint, it was more than just a professional difference. It was a clash of work ethics. He believed that acting was about capturing the moment, no more, no less. Jones, however, was driven by a need to constantly refine and perfect, which made it difficult for Clint to maintain his control over the set. The breaking point came during a particularly heated scene in the Line of Fire. The scene required Jones to be at his most intense, and after Clint yelled, "Cut!" Jones continued to stay in character and deliver lines, ignoring Clint's direction. The room froze, and Clint, who had always prided himself on his ability to command attention with a single word, realized that he had lost control of the situation. The tension in the room was palpable, and Clint knew at that moment that their working relationship had reached its end. He didn't yell or raise his voice. He simply walked away. For Clint, there was no room for another alpha on set. It wasn't about egos, it was about the work. And Jones's refusal to follow Clint's direction in that crucial moment made it clear that they would never see eye to eye. After that incident, Clint Eastwood and Tommy Lee Jones never worked together again. Clint's response was quiet, but it was a decisive one. He had learned a valuable lesson. In his world, there was only room for one alpha. While Jones went on to continue his successful career, Clint made it clear that he wasn't interested in working with someone who didn't respect his approach to filmmaking. For Clint, leadership wasn't about force or conflict. It was about maintaining control through discipline and respect. Jones had crossed a line, and Clint wasn't willing to compromise on that. Jones never worked with Clint again, and Clint, he learned a valuable lesson. There's only room for one alpha in his world. Richard Burton. Richard Burton was a legendary actor, known for his immense talent and deep, commanding voice. But behind the fame and success, he struggled with personal demons, particularly his battle with alcohol. This personal conflict was well known in Hollywood, but it became a serious problem on set during the filming of Where Eagles Dare in 1968. While Clint Eastwood had built his career on discipline, punctuality, and a strict work ethic, Burton's behavior on set was anything but disciplined. Clint was a man who valued precision and professionalism, showing up early, ready to work, and giving everything to his role. Burton, however, often arrived late, sometimes intoxicated, and struggled to maintain focus during filming. The difference in their work ethics created a rift that quickly grew difficult to ignore. While Clint Eastwood approached each scene with a quiet determination, Burton's alcohol-fueled mistakes started to interfere with the production. Clint, known for his calm demeanor, had to watch as Burton stumbled through take after take, sometimes slurring his lines or failing to deliver a performance that met Clint's expectations. Clint, ever the professional, never raised his voice or caused a scene, but it was clear to everyone on set that Burton's behavior was starting to wear thin on him. Clint's silent judgment was his way of showing frustration. He wasn't the type to confront Burton directly, but each botched take, each slurred line, felt like a personal affront to Clint's dedication to the craft. While Clint would get through a scene in a couple of takes, Burton's unprofessionalism dragged things out, wasting precious time. Clint never yelled, never caused a stir, but the tension was palpable. His response wasn't loud, but it was just as cutting. He simply kept his distance, doing his job without engaging with Burton in any meaningful way. Clint had a quiet, stoic manner that could be mistaken for indifference, but it was actually a form of quiet judgment. Clint didn't need to raise his voice because his presence alone spoke volumes. But the breaking point came when Burton showed blatant disrespect for the project. After repeatedly struggling with his lines and clearly not putting in the effort Clint expected, Burton openly referred to the film as just a paycheck job. To Clint, this comment was a slap in the face. It wasn't just about the movie or the paycheck. It was about respect for the craft and for those who were giving their best. Clint, who saw every film as a piece of his soul, couldn't tolerate this kind of disrespect. That was the final straw. Clint's disgust was clear, and from that point on, he made it known that there would be no more collaboration between him and Burton. Clint didn't need to confront Burton in a dramatic way. His silent response was enough. He had already mentally cut ties with Burton. The disrespect Burton showed wasn't just about one film or one incident. It was about Clint's core values. He had no tolerance for anyone who didn't take their craft seriously. For Clint, it wasn't just about acting. It was about showing up, doing the work, and respecting the process. Clint didn't just cut ties with Burton. He severed the respect forever. From that moment, their professional relationship was over. Clint never worked with Burton again, and when asked about him in later years, Clint would only say, "Talented guy, wasted talent." For Clint, that was all he needed to say. The matter was settled. But there's one more betrayal that defined Clint's unforgiving nature. John Seaborg Clint Eastwood's career has been built on professionalism, discipline, and a no-nonsense approach to filmmaking. He expected nothing less from his co-stars and colleagues, but during the making of Paint Your Wagon in 1969, Clint faced a betrayal that would haunt him for years to come. And it came from Jean Seaborg, his co-star on the film. Seaborg was known for her delicate emotional state, and it quickly became apparent that her struggles would create problems on set. Clint, with his steady and focused demeanor, was the opposite of Seaborg. Where he was calm and punctual, she was unpredictable, emotionally fragile, and often difficult to work with. Clint had always been someone who showed up on time, did the work, and moved on. But Seaborg's behavior seemed to disrupt the smooth flow of production. In the beginning, Clint tried to be patient with Seaborg, understanding that she was going through a tough time. But, as filming progressed, her behavior became increasingly erratic. Some days she would charm the crew and show up on set, ready to work. Other days, she would retreat into herself, locking herself in her trailer for hours, refusing to engage with anyone. Clint, who prided himself on getting things done without unnecessary drama, found her behavior frustrating. He was a man who valued consistency and dedication, and Seaborg's mood swings tested his patience. While Clint continued to focus on his work, Seaborg's erratic behavior created tension on set. The crew noticed, and it became clear that the film's production was being held back by her unpredictable emotional state. The real betrayal, however, came after the film was released. Paint Your Wagon wasn't the success many had hoped for, and when the movie bombed, Seaborg publicly criticized Clint's performance, claiming that his portrayal in the film was wooden and uninspired. This was a direct attack on Clint's integrity and professionalism. To him, it was the betrayal of the highest order, not just a critique of his work, but a public insult from someone he had tried to help and understand. Seaborg's comment, especially after everything Clint had done to hold the production together, was the final straw. Clint had put in the work and dedication to make the film as good as it could be, but Seaborg's words felt like a slap in the face. From that moment on, Clint refused to work with her again. Her actions were unforgivable in his eyes. The silent judgment Clint often displayed was his way of dealing with situations like these. He never raised his voice, but his decisions spoke volumes. He never spoke of Seaborg again in interviews, and when news of her death in 1979 reached him, Clint remained silent. It wasn't anger that caused him to stay quiet. It was his belief that some people simply weren't cut out for the work, and Seaborg was one of them. Her public criticism had sealed her fate in Clint's eyes, and he had no intention of revisiting their relationship, either professionally or personally. Clint Eastwood's silent wrath was his final verdict. He didn't need to say anything more about Seaborg. He had already cut her out of his life, both professionally and emotionally. But did his unyielding stance ever truly cost him the respect of the industry? It's a question that remains, but Clint's refusal to tolerate disrespect has always been part of who he is, and that includes cutting ties with those who betray his trust. Clint Eastwood has always lived by a simple but powerful code: loyalty, respect, and strength. He believed that the people you work with should share the same level of dedication and honesty that you give to them. Throughout his career, Clint showed up on time, did his work with discipline, and never caused unnecessary problems. That was his standard, and he expected others to match it. When they didn't, when they brought ego, carelessness, or disrespect into the work, it felt like more than just a disagreement to him. It felt personal. That's why the betrayals he experienced cut so deeply. They weren't just about creative differences or strong opinions, they were breaks in trust. For Clint, loyalty meant everything, and once someone broke that, there was little chance of rebuilding it. Clint's way of responding to betrayal was quiet but final. He didn't shout, didn't publicly argue, and didn't seek revenge in loud ways. Instead, he simply removed people from his life. His silence was his strength. Some people might see this as cold, but for Clint, it was about protecting his integrity. He didn't believe in wasting energy on people who didn't respect the work. His silence was a message. If you crossed him, there was no coming back. This approach shaped how others saw him, not as weak or emotional, but as someone who stood firm in his values. However, this refusal to forgive came with a cost. Clint's strong code made him respected, but it also made him distant from parts of the Hollywood community. Some admired him for never compromising who he was. Others found him hard to approach, believing that one mistake could mean being cut off forever. Still, Clint never seemed bothered by this. He didn't chase approval or try to please everyone. He focused on the work and the people who shared his level of seriousness and respect. And despite the conflicts and silent separations, his legacy remained strong. Clint Eastwood may never have forgiven those who betrayed him, but in his silence, he left a mark that Hollywood can never erase. Clint Eastwood's career and personal life have always been driven by a strong sense of self and a deep commitment to his values. His legacy is not just about the films he directed or the iconic roles he played. It's about the code he lived by, a code that placed loyalty, respect, and strength above all else. Clint's way of handling betrayal was unique. Instead of reacting with anger or confrontation, he chose silence. To many, his refusal to forgive might seem harsh, but in Clint's eyes, it was the only way to preserve his integrity. For him, betrayal wasn't just a personal disappointment. It was an affront to the values he held dear. When someone crossed that line, they were gone from his life, and there was no need to discuss it further. This approach to life and work left a lasting impression on Hollywood and beyond. Clint wasn't interested in maintaining superficial relationships or appeasing others. He valued respect over popularity, and that has earned him admiration from those who understood his code. Even when he was faced with betrayal by people he worked closely with, he didn't let it break him. Instead, it shaped him and reinforced his commitment to those who were loyal and trustworthy. As you reflect on Clint's journey, it's a reminder for all of us to consider how much we value loyalty and respect in our own lives. How far would we go to maintain our integrity? Would we, like Clint, be willing to carry the weight of betrayal with us if it meant holding on to our values? It's a tough question, and one that challenges us to think about our own boundaries and what we are willing to tolerate from others. Now, the question remains, can we truly move on from betrayal, or do we, like Clint, carry the weight of those wrongs forever?